Warm salt water touches your wrists as tonight we drift along the Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes, where old fire has become a quiet garden. Settle in and let the motion be slow. The surface above us still remembers sunlight, a wide, trembling silver, but below your body the reef begins to tilt away into blue shadow, and the water gathers around you like silk. We are not hurrying down the Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes. We are only floating, letting the island's ancient stone guide us lower, past coral heads that have grown on dark lava, past soft fans that lean into the tide. You can feel the sea change by small degrees, a cooler thread along your arms, a softer hush around your ears, a faint mineral scent carried from wet rock and salt. The world above becomes thinner. Here, the land has not ended so much as continued underwater. Komodo's hills, dry and folded in the sun, keep descending beneath the waves, and their volcanic bones become ledges, walls, terraces, and dim slopes where life fastens itself patiently. You can picture the old eruptions cooling into stone, then the sea arriving, then the corals taking their time. Centuries pass like slow breath here. As we hover near the upper reef, the light is still generous. It falls through the water in long blue columns, broken by tiny plankton that glitter when you turn your head. The coral is not arranged like a garden planned by human hands, but it still feels composed, with branching colonies in the shallows, round boulder corals below them, and plates reaching outward where the slope begins to steepen. You notice color first, because color is what the day leaves behind. Small damselfish move above the coral like blue sparks. Amphias gather in soft orange clouds, facing into the current, each one adjusting by the smallest flick of a fin. You can watch them without needing anything to happen. Their lives are made of staying in place, feeding on what the water brings, and slipping back into coral fingers when a shadow passes overhead. The reef breathes through them, gently, repeatedly, quietly. The Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes are shaped by movement, though the movement is often too broad to see at once. Water from the Pacific side and water from the Indian Ocean side meet around these islands, and the tides draw them through narrow channels with a steady, muscular patience. Sometimes that water is warm and clear, sometimes it rises colder from below, carrying nutrients that feed plankton, which feed small mouths, which feed the whole bright slope. You can feel that meeting in the temperature. One moment the water rests warm against your cheeks, and then a cooler ribbon passes through, delicate and clean like a window opening somewhere below. The reef does not resist it. Sea fans lean. Feather stars loosen their arms. Soft corals swell and take the passing water into their many small bodies, filtering the invisible meal that drifts by in the current. We sink a little further, and the surface light begins to soften behind us. The reef is still close enough to touch, though we only look. On the dark volcanic rock, crusts of coralline algae spread in pink and lavender skins, sealing old lava with living mineral, making a foundation for coral larvae to settle. A place once made by heat becomes a place made by patience, one thin layer after another. This is one of the quiet truths of the Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes. The reef is alive because the stone is firm, and the stone is welcoming because the sea has weathered it for so long. Tiny animals build limestone cups, algae share sunlight with them, sponges press into cracks and clean the water molecule by molecule. Worms, shrimps, snails, and brittle stars occupy the hidden spaces you might miss unless you let your eyes become slow. You start to notice the small ones first. A cleaner shrimp waves white antennae from a crevice, almost transparent except for its red lines and patience signal. A goby rests on black sand beside a watchful shrimp, the two of them sharing a doorway in the slope. You can imagine their world as a single burrow, a little porch of volcanic grains, a horizon measured in inches, and still it is enough. There are nudibranchs here too, bright and unhurried, moving across sponge and algae with the pace of sleep. One may be yellow as soft wax, another violet-edged, another patterned like a tiny festival lantern carried through the blue dimness. Their colors are not decorations for us. They are messages in a chemical world, signals of taste, warning, and identity. Yet from where we drift, They look like small dreams walking across stone. As we descend along the Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes, the reef narrows into terraces and overhangs, and the water darkens by a shade. The sunlight now arrives less like a sheet and more like a memory, a blue glow resting above the corals. You can still see your hands, but their edges look softer. The sound of the surface has thinned into a deep, even hush, while the pressure gathers gently around your chest like a blanket. Here, the corals change their shapes. Branching forms become less common, where the slope is steeper and the water carries more force. Massive corals sit low and rounded, holding their place for many seasons of tide. Plate corals reach outward from the rock, catching light where light still reaches. And beneath them, small fish pause in the shade. You can feel how every shape is a compromise with water. The science of this place is quiet, but it is everywhere. Corals need sunlight for the algae living in their tissues. Yet they also need water that moves enough to bring oxygen and food. Too much sediment can smother them. Too much heat can trouble the partnership inside their bodies. Around Komodo, the same currents that pull at you also refresh the reef, bringing cooler water and nutrients from deeper layers, carrying away waste, keeping the slope awake. You may sense the reef as a single body now. The fans, the sponges, the coral plates, and the fish are all arranged by the flow, each one turned toward what the sea gives. A sponge does not chase. A coral does not wander. Even the fish, restless as they seem, return again and again to the same sheltering heads. Life here is not always a journey outward. Much of it is the art of remaining. A hawkfish settles on a coral branch, red and white against the blue, watching the water with calm precision. Butterfly fish move in pairs, tracing familiar paths over the reef face, their narrow mouths searching for coral polyps, worms, or tiny invertebrates tucked between ridges. Parrotfish pass slowly, scraping algae from limestone with beak-like teeth, and the sound, if you were close enough, would be a faint roughness inside the hush. You can let that sound become part of the rhythm. Scrape, pause, fin, current, breath. Nothing is urgent on the Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes when we watch from this drifting place. Even feeding looks like a form of listening. The reef gives a little, the fish take a little. Sand is made grain by grain, as parrotfish chew old coral and release pale fragments that settle lower on the slope. And as we sink further, the reef turns from sunlit color toward quieter forms of texture, and the blue above us becomes more distant. The water cools again. You feel it along the back of your neck first, then under your palms, a slow change that seems to come from inside the ocean rather than from any single direction. The volcanic slope falls away beneath us in ledges of black and grey, softened by life, but still carrying the memory of fire. This middle depth belongs to shadow-loving animals. Sea fans widen across the current like lacework windows, their branches covered in tiny polyps open to the flow. Soft corals lift fleshy lobes from the rock, cream, rose, amber, and muted purple. Their colors dimmer now, but richer when your eyes adjust. Crinoids, the feather stars, cling to high points, unfolding many arms that curl and uncurl with astonishing patience. The Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes are not flat, and that matters. Every ridge changes the current. Every overhang makes shelter. Every small chimney of rock becomes a place where plankton gathers, where fish collect, where hunters and cleaners and grazers all find their particular positions. Geology becomes behavior. The old volcano does not speak, but its angles tell the living reef where to gather. You can hover beside a sea fan and imagine the water passing through it. Each polyp is a small animal, soft as a flower, with tentacles spread to catch drifting particles. There is no mouthful large enough to notice, only the endless arrival of the very small. This is how much of the deep reef lives. It accepts the falling world, the plankton, the eggs, the fragments, the invisible richness moving through darkness. A pygmy seahorse may be here, though you might look for a long time before seeing it. Its body can match the branches of its sea fan so closely that it seems less like a separate creature than a knot in the coral's own dream. You lean closer, in your mind, not disturbing anything, just letting the eye soften. Then the shape resolves. A tiny curled tail, a small head, a living stillness no larger than a fingernail. There are fish that use stillness the same way. A leaf scorpionfish may rest on a ledge, rocking slightly in the current, its body shaped like a drifting leaf caught underwater. We do not need to make fear from it. It is simply a patient animal, colored by its habitat, waiting in the quiet economy of the slope. Around it, glassfish gather beneath an overhang, their bodies nearly clear, holding the blue inside themselves. The deeper we go, the more the reef asks you to notice texture instead of brightness. Sponge surfaces are rough, velvet, pitted, or smooth. Some grow like vases, some like crusts, some like folded ears pressed to the rock. Tunicates form pale clusters, each one filtering water through a soft body. Bryozoans make delicate, branching colonies that seem almost drawn onto the current. The world becomes smaller and more intricate. Below this, the water changes again, and we follow the Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes into a dimmer, green-blue calm. The sunlight has lost its warmth now. It still enters, but it arrives scattered, gentle, and faint, as though it has traveled through many rooms before reaching us. Your skin feels the pressure more clearly, not as weight, but as an even surrounding hand, keeping every motion slow. At this depth, the reef slope may open into patches of dark sand between coral outcrops. The sand is volcanic, not the pale powder of some tropical postcards, and it carries a quiet gravity of its own. Black grains hold the story of cooled lava, broken rock, and long weathering. When the current moves lightly over them, they shift in soft ripples, and each ripple catches the last remaining blue. This darker sand is a habitat, not an emptiness. You begin to see small eyes, small fins, small openings where animals have made homes. Garden eels may rise from burrows in loose fields, thin bodies swaying with the water, then sink lower when a shadow moves too close. You can watch them from a respectful distance, and their motion becomes almost like seagrass, though each one is an animal feeling the current. Jawfish and gobies use the sand differently. They sort grains, clear entrances, and hold their positions with an attention that feels meditative. A jawfish may hover above its burrow, mouth slightly open, body trembling just enough to stay in place. Nearby, a small crab carries bits of sponge or algae, becoming part of the bottom as it walks. On the Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes, concealment can be a kind of peace. The science here is made of grains and flow. Sand settles where the current relaxes, and it moves where the water gathers speed. Fine sediment can cloud the light, but it also carries organic matter. Bacteria live between the grains. Worms turn the surface gently. Tiny crustaceans feed there, and fish feed on them. The slope is not only coral and color. It is also the quiet work of the bottom renewing itself. You may smell, in imagination, the salt and mineral darkness of this place, the clean coldness of water that has passed over stone. There is no actual human breath here except the one we bring in the story, but the mind supplies its own sense of wet rock, faint algae, and distant open sea. The sound is lower now. Your ears hold only a soft internal hum, and the reef seems to speak through silence. A blue-spotted stingray may rest partly covered on the sand, its body shaped like a smooth leaf. Its spots still glow in the dimness, scattered like tiny pieces of sky that have sunk too far. It breathes by drawing water over its gills, patient and settled, while small fish pass above without ceremony. We drift higher than it, letting it remain exactly where it wants to be. On the nearby rock, lionfish may hang almost motionless beneath an overhang, their fins spread like soft fans. We keep the tone gentle because the animal itself is not dramatic here. It is part of the reef's slow pattern, waiting where small fish pass, using shape and stillness as tools. In the half-light, its striped body becomes another piece of the volcanic slope, a living ornament of patience. And as we descend further, the bright reef life becomes more scattered, and the Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes begin to feel wider, older, and more hushed. The slope does not end. It keeps going, losing color gradually, trading gardens for ledges, ledges for rubble, rubble for dark sand, while the water presses around you with a calm consistency that lets the body loosen into rest. At these lower reef slopes, the animals are often spaced farther apart. A barrel sponge may stand alone, like a weathered cup, its rim wide, its body filtering great volumes of water over long, quiet days. Sea whips rise from the rock in slender curves, bending with the current. Black corals, which are often not black on the outside, may branch in delicate forms, building slowly in the dimness where less sunlight reaches. The Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes carry food down from brighter water. Bits of plankton, mucus, broken algae, larval forms, and soft organic snow drift through the water column, making a slow rain. Some of it is eaten before it reaches the bottom, some settles into crevices, some feeds bacteria and worms, and some becomes part of the sediments that gather in the deeper pockets of the slope. Nothing is wasted quickly here. You can imagine holding very still and watching that rain. At first you might see nothing, only blue darkness and the outline of a sea whip. Then your eyes begin to catch the particles, tiny flecks sliding downward, sideways, upward again, in a wandering path shaped by currents too subtle to name. The ocean is always carrying its own memory. What blooms above eventually descends, and what descends becomes life below. The fish here often move with measured purpose. Soldierfish and squirrelfish shelter in darker recesses during the day, their large eyes prepared for low light. Cardinal fish hover in loose groups, silver bodies catching what little brightness remains. A moray eel may show only its head from a crevice, opening and closing its mouth to pass water over its gills. It is not a threat in our story, only a resident at its doorway. You notice how many lives are organized around openings, holes, cracks, caves, burrows, and spaces under coral all become rooms in this underwater hillside. The volcanic rock made the first architecture. The corals and sponges modified it. Animals moved in generation after generation until the slope became a neighborhood of hidden interiors. We pass outside those rooms quietly, like listeners walking softly past doors at night. This is the comfort of the deepening reef. Not everything needs to be visible. Much of the Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes is made of what is tucked away, resting behind coral, under ledges, inside sponges, within the porous rock. The ocean does not ask every creature to announce itself. Some lives are meant to be glimpsed only briefly and then allowed to return to shadow. When the slope steepens again, we move downward with it, and the last warm colors fade into blue, gray, and muted green. You can still remember the orange antheas above, the lavender crusts on stone, and the bright nudibranch crossing sponge. But here those memories feel like sunlight remembered from another room. The water is colder now and the hush has grown thicker. The lower Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes are shaped by both abundance and restraint. Nutrient-rich water can make life dense, yet reduced light limits the corals that depend heavily on their inner algae. Animals that filter, scavenge, graze, and wait become more important. Sponges thrive where water moves steadily. Gorgonians and black corals extend into the flow. Crustaceans find refuge in crevices. The reef shifts from a sun-fed garden toward a current-fed forest. You may see long-nosed hawkfish perched among branches of black coral or gorgonian, their bodies delicate and patterned. They hold themselves with small fin movements, not drifting away, not pushing forward. A commensal shrimp may live among anemone tentacles, cleaning, feeding, and sharing shelter. Brittle stars coil their arms into sponge openings, then extend them when food passes. So much of this world is touch without noise. The chemistry of the water matters here. Oxygen, temperature, nutrients, and acidity all shape who can live on the slope. The currents around Komodo often bring cooler, nutrient-bearing water upward from depth, and this upwelling can make the reef especially productive. It can also make the water feel more changeable, with sudden cool layers and greenish visibility, but we experience that change as a slow folding of one water into another. You can feel the fold now. The current brushes one side of your body and then the other, as if the sea is turning in its sleep. Fine particles move past your face. The reef smells, in the mind's quiet way, of salt, stone, and living surfaces. Your hands relax. Your breathing slows. We are not searching for a destination. We are letting the slope carry us into stillness. A cuttlefish may pass over the sand with a motion so soft it hardly seems like swimming. Its skin shifts in shade and texture, reading the bottom and answering it with ripples of color. It can look like mottled rock, then pale sand, then a darker patch of shadow. We watch it as we would watch a thought forming and dissolving, with no need to interrupt its quiet intelligence. Octopuses also belong to these slopes, though they may appear only as an eye, a curve of arm, or a slight change in the pattern of stones. An octopus can make a den from rubble and shells, gathering pieces around itself like a small private wall. At dusk, it may move out to explore, tasting the world with its arms. For now, in our slow descent, it remains a hidden presence. Below this, the reef opens into another kind of twilight, where the Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes feel less like a wall and more like a broad underwater hillside. The living patches are separated by darker intervals. Sand channels run between outcrops, rubble gathers where old coral has broken and settled. The eye has fewer colors to follow, so it begins to follow shapes. There is a quiet geology in rubble. Broken coral branches and volcanic stones create small chambers where juvenile fish can hide, where crabs can sort food, where worms and mollusks can live beneath the surface. What looks like disorder is often another form of habitat. The sea rearranges pieces with storms, currents, and time, and then life reads the new pattern. You can feel how slowly the bottom learns itself again. The Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes sit in a region where tides are powerful teachers. Water drawn between islands accelerates, relaxes, rises, and falls, and the reef communities reflect that rhythm. On exposed points, corals and fans must be firmly attached. In sheltered pockets, finer sediments settle, and smaller animals find softer ground. The whole slope is a map of water's habits, drawn across stone and living tissue in motion. You may notice schooling fish farther off the reef, not close enough to crowd us, just silver forms turning together in the dim water. Fusiliers, trevallies, or snappers may pass through these channels, using the slope as a guide and a feeding ground. Their bodies catch the remaining light and release it as quick, soft flashes. They are not a spectacle here. They are weather made of fish. The reef's daily rhythm continues whether we watch or not. During daylight, many small animals shelter from open water and planktonic life remains dispersed in the brightness above. As evening approaches, countless creatures rise from hiding, and the water column fills with feeding, drifting, mating, and migration. The deep scattering layer, that vast community of small fish, squid, and crustaceans, begins its nightly movement upward. Even rest has cycles. In a sleep story, this is the moment where your own body may begin to echo the sea. Thoughts rise and sink. Some come close to the surface, then drift away before they become words. The reef does not hurry them. The slope does not correct them. You are allowed to be as quiet as a sponge filtering darkness, as settled as sand collecting in a hollow, as unannounced as a shrimp behind coral. And as we follow the slope lower still, the Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes become a place of sparse lights and patient forms. We are beyond the easy brightness now. The world is not empty, but it asks for a slower kind of attention, the kind you have when the room is dark and your eyes have stopped demanding sharp edges. The blue has deepened, and the water feels ancient. Some animals here make their own light or carry the chemistry that can make light when disturbed. In the open water, near the reef, tiny plankton may flash when moved, each glow brief and blue-green, a spark without heat. Certain small crustaceans and fish use light to confuse, signal, or disappear against the faint glow from above. Bioluminescence is not decoration in the deep. It is language made visible. You can imagine lifting one hand very slowly and the water around your fingers answering with a few faint stars. We do not need to disturb the place to know the possibility is there. The Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes are connected to a larger dark ocean, and in that ocean, light is often small, private, and precise. It appears, then vanishes, leaving the darkness softer than before. The science of bioluminescence is simple in feeling, though complex in detail. Chemicals within an animal's body react with oxygen, and energy becomes light rather than heat. Different animals use different systems. Some make the light themselves. Some host glowing bacteria. The result can be a pulse, a shimmer, a line of dots, or a cloud released into the water, each one serving the quiet needs of survival without any drama in our telling. Near the reef, flashlight fish may shelter in darker places, carrying glowing bacteria in organs beneath their eyes. They can cover and uncover that light, blinking softly as they move. In the blackness, such signals help them remain together, feed, and communicate. If we saw them from a distance, they might look like small lanterns turning behind a curtain. You would not chase them, you would simply notice. There is comfort in lights that do not try to fill the whole dark. A city pushes darkness away, but the deep sea keeps it and lets little lights exist inside it. The Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes teach this balance. Coral needs light where it can find it. Sponges and fans live by flow where light fades. Fish use glow only when glow is useful. Nothing here wastes brightness. Your mind may be dimming too, in the gentlest way. The details remain, but they loosen. Sea fans become lace in shadow. Sand ripples become lines on a sleeping palm. Fish become brief reflections, then soft absences. We continue downward, and the slope continues with us, its volcanic foundation disappearing into the larger dark, its living surfaces breathing in the invisible rain. Below this twilight, the reef becomes more widely spaced, and the Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes begin to merge with deeper channels and sedimented ground. The transition is gradual. One coral outcrop stands here, another farther down, then a sponge, then a field of black sand crossed by pale tracks. The ocean does not draw a sharp line. It changes by lowering its voice. At these depths, many creatures live by waiting for what arrives. Detritus falls from above. Small animals migrate past. Currents carry larvae, plankton, and fragments of organic matter along the slope. Crabs pick through rubble with delicate claws. Sea cucumbers move over sediment, processing grains through their bodies, leaving the surface slightly changed behind them. Their work is quiet, repetitive, and essential, like smoothing a sheet in a dark room. Sea cucumbers are easy to overlook, but you can rest with them. They do not flash or hurry. They gather what the bottom offers and return clean sediment to the seafloor. Some are dark and soft, some are patterned, some lift feeding tentacles into the current. On the Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes, they are part of the slow housekeeping of the sea, tending the places where brighter life has shed its dust. Brittle stars may spread across sponges at night, arms moving with a delicate, searching grace. Basket stars can unfold from tight knots into elaborate branching nets, capturing food from passing water. The transformation is almost floral, though it belongs entirely to an animal. When the current is right, they open. When it changes, they close. You can feel how much wisdom there is in waiting for the right flow. The volcanic slope beneath all this remains present, even when hidden by sediment. It creates incline, roughness, and shelter. It gives the reef its descending path. Komodo's islands were shaped by tectonic and volcanic forces along the great arcs of Indonesia, where plates have pressed, melted, lifted, and cooled across immense time. We do not need to travel through that history quickly. We can let it rest beneath us like a deep bass note. You may imagine the old lava cooling in contact with air, then waves, then sea. Basalt darkens, cracks form, minerals weather, corals settle where light allows, and other animals settle where current feeds them. The landscape changes from fire to stone, from stone to reef, from reef to sediment, each stage carrying the last inside it. Nothing is erased completely. It is only covered, and as the slope carries us into deeper quiet, the living reef becomes a memory above, and the darker ecosystem takes its place. The Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes still hold life, but it is life arranged by less light, colder water, and longer pauses. You can feel the descent in your body now, not as effort, but as release, as though the bed beneath you were also sinking through blue water. Here, the fish are fewer, or simply less visible. A grouper may rest in a recess, its broad body patterned like the surrounding stone. A small eel threads through rubble and disappears. Cardinal fish hold under a ledge, Cleaner stations may still exist where small wrasses or shrimp tend to visiting fish, removing parasites with careful attention. Even in shadow, there are services, meetings, exchanges, and quiet forms of trust. The reef is never only one kind of life. It is a woven place. Corals build, algae feed, sponges filter, bacteria transform, fish graze, shelter, clean, and carry nutrients from one part of the system to another. Invertebrates occupy every crack. Predators keep movement balanced without needing any sharp story from us. The Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes are a community made from countless small agreements with water. You can let the idea of community become softer here. It is not noise, it is not crowding. It is each being doing what its body knows, in a place shaped by stone, tide, temperature, and time. A shrimp waves from a hole, a sponge drinks the sea, a coral polyp opens, a fish returns to its shelter. The slope holds them all without comment. The light above continues to fade. If you look upward, the surface is no longer a bright ceiling, but a dim region where blue becomes blue-black. If you look downward, the slope has no clear ending. It is comforting somehow to be between two soft distances. The water touches every part of you equally. The current is mild now, or perhaps we have learned to move with it. Below this, the Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes lead us toward the quieter foot of the reef, where sediment gathers and the old volcanic angle eases. The water feels cooler, the colors nearly gone, and the remaining shapes appear in low contrast, like charcoal marks beneath glass. We keep descending gently, with no need to arrive too soon, because the descent itself is the place we came to know. The lower slope holds traces of everyone above. Coral fragments roll here, shells settle here, fine organic particles rest here before being eaten, buried, or lifted again. Tracks cross the sediment where crabs, snails, sea stars, and worms have moved through the dark. The bottom is a page written lightly, and the current edits it throughout the night. You can read some marks, then watch them fade. Sea stars move with a slowness that suits this world. Their tube feet touch, release, and touch again. Hundreds of small motions hidden beneath one simple shape. Some feed on detritus. Some graze. Some search for mollusks or other invertebrates. None of this needs to feel dramatic. It is only life continuing at the pace allowed by cold water, dim light, and the patient metabolism of the deepening reef. On the Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes, even decay is gentle work. A fallen coral branch becomes shelter, then substrate, then food for borers and grazers, then sand and calcium carbonate. A dead sponge returns its materials to bacteria and scavengers. A fish that dies feeds crabs, worms, and microbes. The reef wastes little. It keeps passing itself along form to form, life to life, quietly. You may feel your own edges softening with that thought. The boundary between watching and resting becomes thin. The slope continues beneath you, but you do not need to measure it. The animals continue their careful lives, but you do not need to name each one. Salt, stone, darkness, and water are enough for a while. The sea is full without asking for attention, and now we drift lower, where the Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes are more shadow than color, more contour than garden, and the hush seems to come from the stone itself. The current moves over the bottom in a slow sheet. Fine particles lift and settle. A sea cucumber crosses a darker patch of sand. A small fish vanishes into a crevice, and the crevice becomes only rock again. The science of this lower place is the science of reduced energy. Less sunlight means less direct photosynthesis. Cooler water slows many bodies. Food often arrives as drift, migration, or fall. Animals conserve motion. They build tissues suited to waiting, filtering, sensing, and responding only when the water offers something worth answering. You can feel that lesson in your own muscles as they loosen into the mattress and stop holding the day. There is also resilience here, though we say it softly. Reefs in places like Komodo live with changeable currents, temperature shifts, sediment, storms, and the long pulse of seasons. Some corals recover, some areas change, some slopes hold refuges where cooler water helps life endure heat that would trouble shallower reefs. The story is not simple, but it is patient, and patience belongs to this landscape. You are not asked to solve the reef tonight. You are only invited to accompany it for a little while, to feel the older rhythm beneath its colors and creatures. The Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes are not a display. They are a living mountainside underwater, ancient in foundation, young in every growing polyp, and endlessly renewed by the tide. A final band of reef rises beside us, low and uneven. Sponges cling to its side. A few soft corals open small pale hands into the water. Tiny fish shelter close to the rock, their bodies almost colorless now. The sand below is darker than the water above it, and the line between them blurs when the current passes. Everything seems to breathe through the same slow fabric. As we pass this ledge, you may notice one last cluster of light. Not sunlight exactly, but the faint gleam of reflective eyes, the pale edge of a fish turning, the soft living shimmer that appears and disappears in the dim. The reef still lives here, only more quietly. It has not ended with the loss of color. It has simply changed its language, and we have become slower listeners. Below this ledge, the slope opens again, and we follow it without hurry. The Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes continue into a deeper plane of volcanic sand and scattered life, where every movement is measured and every resting place seems chosen by the water itself. The pressure is steady, the cold is mild, the dark is not empty. It is spacious, patient, and full of small breathing things. The deeper sand at the foot of the Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes receives the reef like a slow exhale. What broke above settles here, not as loss, but as another beginning, softened by water and rearranged by small animals moving through darkness. You can see faint trails crossing the grains, some straight, some looping, some vanishing under a stone, and each one is a quiet signature left by a body we may never need to see. The bottom keeps these traces only briefly, then lets them fade. We drift just above it, close enough to feel the imagined coolness rising from the sand. The particles are not all alike. Some are volcanic, dark and heavy, made from the old island stone. Some are pale fragments of coral, shell and skeleton, carried down from the brighter reef. Together they make a mixed floor, a soft record of fire and life resting in the same hollow beneath the Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes. A small hermit crab moves across this floor with careful steps, carrying a borrowed shell that has been polished by sand. It pauses beside a pebble, tests it, and moves on. Nearby, a brittle star hides beneath a ledge, with only two arms extended into the open water. You might miss these lives if you expected the reef to stay loud with color, but down here the smallest motion becomes visible. The water above the sand is not still, though it feels peaceful. It slides along the slope in layers, some warmer, some cooler, some carrying clearer blue, some holding greenish plankton and mineral haze. Around Komodo, tides and channels fold these layers together, and the animals learn the pattern through their bodies. A sea whip bends when food arrives. A fish turns into the flow. A worm extends and withdraws with the changing touch. You can let yourself breathe with that pattern. In as the current lifts the fine dust, out as it settles again. The Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes have their own sleep rhythm, not a sleep of absence, but of slow activity spread across many small lives. Nothing here asks for speed. Even the animals that hunt do so with restraint, conserving their movement, waiting for the water to bring the right moment close enough. A lizardfish may rest on the sand, low and patterned, almost indistinguishable from the grains beneath it. Its eyes remain clear and alert, but its body is quiet. We do not turn it into danger. It is only another resident of the slope, living by stillness and timing. Above it, small fish pass in loose groups, silvering briefly as they cross a faint band of light, then disappearing back into blue. The volcanic reef slopes of Komodo are full of these thresholds. Rock becomes coral, coral becomes rubble, rubble becomes sand, shallow color becomes dim texture, warm water becomes cool. Every threshold is gradual enough for life to adapt around it, and as we follow them, you may feel your own thoughts passing through similar changes. What was sharp at the surface becomes rounded here. What was bright becomes quiet. We move along the contour now, not straight down, but diagonally across the slope. where scattered coral outcrops rise from the darker bottom. Each one is a small island of structure. Glassfish hover in the shelter beneath an overhang, their bodies reflecting what little light remains. A shrimp waits upside down in a crevice. A sponge opens its pores to the current. The outcrop is small, but it gathers life. On the Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes, structure is shelter, and shelter is possibility. A flat stretch of sand may hold hidden burrows, but a rock face multiplies surfaces, shadows, and entrances. Corals build upward, sponges grow outward. Algae films the stone where light can still reach. Cracks create rooms for crabs, gobies, blennies, and juvenile fish. The reef's richness comes partly from this folding of space, this making of many small worlds within one slope. You can imagine placing your palm near the rock without touching and feeling water squeeze through channels too small to see. In those narrow spaces, oxygen arrives. Waste leaves, larvae settle, bacteria transform nutrients, and the hidden reef continues its work. The visible surface is only the outer skin. Beneath it is a maze of pores, tunnels, bored coral, old worm tubes, and volcanic fractures softened by living growth. A decorator crab may be there, wearing fragments of sponge and algae that make it look like a moving piece of the reef. It does not need to be noticed. Its body has chosen blending, gathering pieces from the surrounding world and carrying them gently as disguise. In the dimness, this feels almost tender, a creature clothing itself in its own neighborhood, becoming part of the place. The next movement downward is barely a movement at all. The slope leans, and we lean with it. Above us, the brighter reef is now only a thought. Somewhere behind and higher, where orange fish still face the current, and corals hold sunlight in their tissues. Here, the Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes have become more spacious, and every form seems to have more darkness around it. The water feels cooler against the face. It has that deep, clean quality of upwelled water, the sense of having traveled far in darkness before arriving along the reef. Such water can be rich with nutrients, and those nutrients awaken plankton when they meet light above. But down here they also feed the filterers directly. Sponges, tunicates, feather stars, soft corals, and small bivalves all open themselves to what the current brings. You begin to understand why stillness can be active. A sponge is not idle. It draws water through chambers lined with beating cells, removing bacteria and tiny particles with a patience too fine for human eyes. A feather star is not merely decorative. Its arms form a living net, and each little branch can pass captured food toward the mouth. The reef works while seeming to rest. Near one outcrop, a school of cardinal fish gathers in the lee of the rock. Their eyes are large, dark, and reflective, suited to shadow. They hover together without crowding, each fish keeping a small distance from the next, the whole group adjusting like a single soft thought when the current shifts. You can watch them for a long time and feel the mind quiet, because their motion has no beginning or end. At night, some cardinal fish carry their young in their mouths, guarding eggs until they hatch. The father may hold them gently, not feeding, sheltering the next generation in a living chamber. Such details belong to the reef's softer stories. Down on the Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes, parenting, feeding, hiding, cleaning, growing, and waiting all occur without spectacle. Life is intimate here, though most of it happens behind the veil of water. The slope below us darkens again, and we follow its falling line into a deeper band. The old volcanic base is more visible now, where coral thins, appearing as dark, angular rock beneath the living crust. It is softened by encrusting sponges, coralline algae, tube worms, and thin films of microbial life, but you can still sense the hard origin underneath. The reef is a calm garment laid over stone. The geology of Komodo belongs to the larger island arcs of Indonesia, where deep earth processes have lifted and shaped the land over long ages. Underwater, those same origins provide steep walls, pinnacles, submerged ridges, and sloping reefs. We do not need to name every plate boundary to feel the result. You can see it in the incline beneath us, in the dark sand, in the sudden ledges where currents gather animals into quiet abundance. Every ledge is a pause in the descent. We drift beside one now, where soft corals hang from the shaded underside, their polyps opened like tiny pale stars. A squat lobster may live among them, orange and tucked away, catching food with delicate appendages. Small worms build tubes along the rock. A sea cucumber rests at the base, its surface dusted with grains. The ledge makes a little night. It is easy in this light to feel how kind darkness can be. Darkness covers the reef without erasing it. It lets small animals come forward. It turns color into shape and shape into presence. The Komodo volcanic reef slopes are not less alive because they are dimmer. They are alive in a way that requires slower attention, and that slower attention is close to sleep. You may hear, inside the hush, the faint imagined clicks and crackles of reef life. Snapping shrimp can make tiny percussive sounds with their claws. Parrotfish and urchins can scrape. Fish can shift in shelter. These sounds do not break the calm. They are more like the quiet settling of a house at night, reminders that a place can be peaceful and still full of movement beneath its surface. As we move lower along the Komodo volcanic reef slopes, the animals that depend on sunlight give way more fully to animals that depend on flow. A large sea fan spreads across the current, each branch positioned to receive what passes. Its form is both delicate and practical. If you imagine the current as invisible rain, the fan is a tree turned sideways drinking from the passing sea. The fan's branches may hold brittle stars, tiny gobies, and small shrimp that live within its architecture. Some match its colors so closely that your eye slides past them until a leg or fin shifts. A pygmy seahorse, if present, is a master of this hidden life, its body shaped by the same bumps and tones as the fan itself. You look and look again, and the reef slowly gives back one detail. This is a gentle lesson from the Komodo volcanic reef slopes. The first glance is never the whole place. A hurried eye sees only coral and fish. A slower eye sees relationships. The fan and the current, the seahorse and the fan, the shrimp and the crevice, the plankton and the tide, the island and the underwater slope. Each detail belongs to something larger, and the larger thing is quiet. The water cools by another subtle degree. Perhaps this is only imagination, but sleep stories work through the body, and your body knows how to respond to coolness. It pulls the blanket closer, it lets the shoulders fall. It accepts the weight around it. Here, the pressure of the sea becomes like the pressure of rest, evenly distributed, calming every loose edge of thought. The reef face bends into a shallow gully, carved by water and gravity and the slow sliding of sediment downslope. Sand gathers in the middle, rock rises on either side. Small fish use the margins, staying near shelter while feeding above the channel floor. A goatfish moves through the sand with its chin barbels extended, tasting for hidden worms and crustaceans, stirring a faint cloud that settles behind it. Goatfish are gentle searchers in this telling. Their barbels are sensory organs, soft tools for reading the bottom. They move with a calm purpose, touching the sediment, lifting food, leaving the sand slightly rearranged. On the Komodo volcanic reef slopes, many animals read the world through touch, taste, vibration, pressure, and chemical trace. Because vision is only one way of knowing, and down here, it is not always the main one. You can let your own senses become less separate. Sight softens into blue-gray shape. Hearing becomes a hush. Touch becomes temperature and pressure. Smell becomes imagined salt and stone. The reef becomes less like a picture and more like a presence surrounding you, a place sensed through the whole body. This is how the deep asks to be known, not quickly, but gently. In the gully wall, an octopus has made a den with shells and stones arranged at the entrance. Only one eye is visible, dark and awake, watching the water pass. Its skin is mottled to match the surrounding rock, changing in tiny pulses, almost too subtle to see. We remain outside its doorway. The quiet between us feels complete, an understanding made only of distance and respect. Octopuses are among the reef's most attentive minds. They taste with their arms, solve small problems, remember textures, and reshape their bodies to fit the available space. Yet on the Komodo volcanic reef slopes, even such intelligence can look like stillness. A thought may be happening behind that eye, but it does not need to be announced. It rests inside the animal, private as a dream. Below the gully, the slope opens again and the water carries a little more suspended life. Tiny particles gleam when they pass between us and the remaining light, then disappear into the blue below. This marine snow is not always white, and it is not snow in the cold sky sense, but it falls with the same softness. It is made of plankton remains, mucus, fecal pellets, fragments, and drifting cells, a slow nourishment from above. Many deep animals live by this fall. They do not need gardens of sunlight around them. They need patience, broad surfaces, sensitive arms, fine filters, and the ability to make enough from what arrives irregularly. A sponge filters, a sea cucumber gathers, a brittle star lifts its arms, a small fish waits for a larva or crustacean to pass near its mouth. The Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes receive the falling world and make it usable. There is comfort in that receiving. You do not have to make the night bright. You do not have to force the current. You can rest and let some things arrive in their own time. The reef has been doing this longer than any human story, taking what the water brings, changing it slowly, building bodies, sand, shelter, and memory from the smallest drifting pieces. The slope now enters a band where rubble is more common, broken coral pieces lying among volcanic stones. This may seem less graceful than the living coral gardens above, but rubble is full of openings. Juvenile fish shelter there. Crabs move beneath it. Worms and mollusks graze on films that grow along each surface. Algae, bacteria, and invertebrates colonize the fragments, turning brokenness into a textured home. On the Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes, disturbance and renewal are part of the long pattern. A coral colony may break in a storm or under its own growing weight. A fragment may settle and die, or it may live and begin again if conditions allow. Rubble may become cemented by algae and encrusting organisms. The reef is not a fixed sculpture. It is a slow conversation between building and undoing. You can picture that conversation without urgency. A wave season passes above, a current shifts, a coral branch falls, a sponge grows over part of it, a shrimp uses the underside, a fish shelters there at night. Fine sediment collects in the hollow. Over time, the fragment loses its original outline and becomes part of the slope's deeper texture. The reef accepts its own changes softly. We continue downward, and the darkness deepens enough that red has nearly vanished from the scene. In seawater, red wavelengths fade quickly, so red animals often appear brown, grey, or black unless a light shines on them. This is why many deeper reef creatures wear colors that would seem bright above, but become muted here. The ocean edits color by depth, and we let that editing soothe us. A shrimp that would be crimson in a diver's lamp may look like a shadow with legs. A red sponge may appear dark plum or brown. A fish with scarlet markings may become subdued, its pattern still useful among low light and shadows. The Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes are a lesson in how reality changes with the light available. Nothing has lost itself. It is simply being seen differently. You may feel that too. In the quiet, thoughts that seemed bright and demanding earlier now become muted shapes. They are still there, but they no longer need attention. The water changes them. The descent changes them. The steady pace of the reef changes them. We keep drifting, not away from the world, but into a calmer layer beneath it, where everything can be held more loosely. A long sea whip rises from the lower slope and bows toward the current. Tiny polyps along its length open like a line of stars, too small for the sky. The whip flexes, then returns, flexes, then returns. It may grow slowly for years, becoming both animal colony and landmark. A small goby rests along it, aligned with the branch, riding its movement as if lying on a breathing stem. The animals here often make use of living structures without harming them. Shrimp shelter in anemones, gobies perch on corals, crabs hide in sponges, brittle stars coil through gorgonian branches. Each relationship has its own terms. Some mutual, some more complex than one word can hold. On the Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes, life is layered not only vertically, but relationally, one living surface offering room for another. We do not need to untangle every relationship tonight. It is enough to know they exist, delicate and numerous, like threads inside the dark. The reef is more than the creatures we can name. It is the space between them, the currents linking them, the chemical traces, the eggs released into water, the larvae searching for settlement, the quiet timing of tides and moonlight. The unseen is part of the whole. As the slope continues, we pass a darker recess where sweepers or squirrelfish may gather, their eyes reflecting the faint light. They prefer the shelter of caves and overhangs by day, emerging more actively at night. Their bodies are adapted to dimness, and they hold themselves in the recess with gentle fin strokes. We pass slowly, and the small school shifts back, then settles again into its interior. That interior is one of many on the Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes. The reef is full of rooms. Some are made by boulders stacked against the slope. Some are under coral plates. Some are inside the skeleton of old coral colonies. Some are burrows in sand. A reef animal's life may depend on knowing exactly where those rooms are, and reaching them without hesitation when the water changes. You can imagine knowing a place so intimately, the exact crack that fits your body, the exact current that brings food, the ledge where cleaning happens, the sand patch where eggs can be guarded, the coral branch that becomes shelter at night. The reef, to its residents, is not scenery. It is a map of memory, scent, pressure, light, and habit. Below this recess, the bottom tilts into a smoother fan of sediment. The grains here may have traveled from higher on the slope, carried by gravity surge and current, then laid down where the incline relaxes. Fine sediments can be difficult for some corals, but many bottom dwellers are made for this softness. Worms tunnel through it, sea cucumbers process it, snails cross it, tiny crustaceans hide just beneath the surface. A sand diving wrasse may vanish into such a patch when resting, leaving almost no trace. Certain gobies hover above their burrows. Tiny shrimp maintain tunnels with patient engineering. The Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes are not only vertical drama and coral walls, they are also these gentle inclines of sediment where the life is quieter, lower, and deeply connected to the grain-by-grain movement of the seafloor. You see a small mound with a circular opening, then another, then a faint line where something has passed beneath the surface. The sand is not blank. It is covered in signs, though many are subtle enough to disappear when the current lifts. This is a good place for drowsiness, because the eye can wander without needing to catch everything. It can let the bottom remain partly unknown. The water carries a faint green cast now, suggesting the richness of plankton and suspended material that often comes with productive seas. Clear water can be beautiful, but slightly clouded water feeds many mouths. Around Komodo, this fertility helps support reefs, fish, manta rays, invertebrates, and the complex food webs threaded through the islands. We feel that fertility not as abundant shouting, but as a soft thickness in the water. That thickness has texture. It catches light in a million small points. It reduces distance. It makes far objects dissolve sooner, so the slope appears in layers rather than all at once. A coral outcrop emerges, passes beside us, and fades behind. A fish crosses the edge of sight and is gone. The ocean gives only the next few meters clearly, and this is enough for rest. When you are falling asleep, the mind also accepts only the near distance. A breath, a phrase, a coolness along the skin. A dim shape beside the reef. The future does not need to be visible all the way down. The Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes continue beyond our sight, and we trust them to continue just as the body trusts the next breath without inspecting it first. A field of soft corals appears along a darker rock face, their branches thicker than the sea fans above, their surfaces covered with open feeding polyps. In brighter light they might be pink, yellow, or cream, but here they are subdued, ghostly, almost lunar. They pulse only with the current. No sudden motion disturbs them. Each colony is many animals together, sharing one shape and one place. Soft corals do not build the same hard limestone framework as reef-building corals, yet they add structure and life to these slopes. They anchor to rock, expand when conditions suit them, and contract when disturbed or when the water changes. Their bodies are supported by tiny internal elements, and their polyps feed directly from the passing sea. On the Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes, they are part of the transition from sunlit reef to shadow-fed community. You can let their opening and closing become a breathing image, expand with the current, fold when the time is right, rest against the rock, open again. The sea does not keep one state forever, and neither does the body. The reef survives by changing softly, by yielding where it can and holding where it must, by allowing each tide to pass through its shape. Near the soft corals, a pair of butterfly fish moves more slowly than the antheas above, their bodies pale in the dimness. They may be searching for small invertebrates, coral polyps, or other food along the rock. Their pairing feels intimate without needing explanation. Many reef fish keep territories, routes, or partnerships, and the slope is organized partly by these repeated paths that only the animals fully know. We drift above one of those paths. Perhaps the butterfly fish follow this ledge every morning. Perhaps they shelter beneath that coral plate at dusk. Perhaps the current tells them when to feed and when to hold close. The Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes are full of repeated journeys so small that a human visitor might never notice them. Yet these routes are the reef's daily music, played in fins and silence. The slope drops again, and the reef outcrops become lower. Now the living cover may appear as patches, each separated by dark sand and stones. A sponge here, a whip coral there, a cluster of feather stars on a rise, a scattering of urchins in a groove. The distance between animals seems greater, but the connections remain, carried by water and by the slow downhill movement of matter. Urchins graze on algae films and organic growth, shaping the balance between open space and overgrowth. Their spines, long or short, create shelter for tiny fish and shrimp. In the dimness, an urchin can look like a dark star resting on the slope. You keep a respectful distance, and it continues its slow work, moving with tube feet so small that the whole body seems to glide by intention alone. Some urchins carry bits of shell, algae, or rubble over themselves, shading their bodies or adding disguise. This habit gives them a small, gathered appearance, as if the bottom has decided to move while wearing pieces of itself. On the Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes, many creatures blur the line between animal and landscape. Camouflage is not absence. It is a way of belonging very closely to home. A channel of cooler water passes us, and the scene dims further for a moment as suspended particles thicken. You feel it like a calm draft moving through a dark hallway. Upwelling and tidal mixing can bring such water from deeper places, and with it comes the nourishment that supports much of this richness. The water may not always look clear, but it is full, and the reef knows how to receive fullness. We continue to let the current guide us. There is no need to push against it. If it moves along the slope, we move along the slope. If it slows near a ledge, we pause there in the story. This is the proper way to visit a place like this in the mind, with the least possible disturbance, letting the Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes reveal themselves through their own slow order. A cleaning station appears on a coral head that still rises from the lower slope. A cleaner wrasse flickers near the top, its slender body moving in a pattern recognized by larger fish. A grouper or surgeonfish may pause there, opening gills or mouth while the cleaner removes parasites and dead tissue. The exchange is delicate, practical, and strangely calm, a small ritual of trust in the middle of the reef. You can watch that ritual without needing it to become a lesson too quickly. The larger fish remain still, the smaller fish works carefully. The reef around them continues filtering, feeding, and swaying. Cooperation does not have to be sentimental. It can be simple and ancient, repeated because it works, held in place by memory, instinct, and the steady need to remain healthy in a living sea. On the Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes, such stations may be known to many fish. They return as they would return to a familiar doorway. The reef becomes not just habitat, but a schedule, a set of appointments with tide, light, hunger, and care. You can rest inside that idea, the comfort of patterns older than speech, patterns that continue whether or not anyone names them. Below the cleaning station, the coral head gives way to a darker stone apron, encrusting sponges spread across it in muted patches. Some may contain chemical compounds that discourage grazing or crowding, making their softness more defended than it appears. Others host tiny animals within their channels. The sponge surface looks still, but inside, water is constantly moving through chambers, carrying food, oxygen, and information from the surrounding sea. There is a whole world inside the porous body of a sponge. Bacteria live there, sometimes in great abundance, participating in nutrient cycles that shape the reef around them. Nitrogen, carbon, and dissolved organic matter pass through these living filters. What seems like a simple animal is also a small ecosystem. The Komodo volcanic reef slopes are built from such nested lives, one quiet inside another. You may feel your attention nesting too. The reef, then the sponge, then the chambers within the sponge, then the microbes within the chambers. The scale becomes smaller and smaller until thought itself becomes fine-grained and slow. Sleep often comes this way, not by shutting the world out, but by letting it become detailed enough and gentle enough that the mind no longer needs to defend its edges. We drift beyond the stone apron, and the slope turns slightly, revealing another face of the underwater hillside. The current is weaker on this side, and the sediment is finer. Corals are more scattered. Small burrow openings are more common. A mantis shrimp may live here, mostly hidden, maintaining a tunnel and watching through remarkable eyes. We leave it peaceful and unnamed beyond this brief passing. Mantis shrimp are vivid animals, but down here we keep our pace low. Their vision is complex. Their burrows are carefully maintained. Their lives are woven into sand, rubble, and reef edges. On the Komodo volcanic reef slopes, even the most alert animals belong to the same slow setting of stone and water. They may move quickly when they need to, but the larger landscape remains unhurried. A small flounder rests on the sand, both eyes turned upward, body flattened into the bottom's pattern. It may shift slightly, and a veil of grain settles over its back. You can see how the animal trusts stillness. The sand covers it. The light passes over it. The current smooths its outline. It becomes almost a thought the seafloor is having, then keeping to itself. The science of such concealment is practical and elegant. On open sediment, there are fewer hard shelters. So many animals rely on blending, burrowing, or remaining motionless. Pigment cells can match background. Body shape can reduce shadows. Behavior can complete what anatomy begins. A fish that lies flat, breathes slowly, and lets sand settle across it is using the landscape as part of its own body. You can use the landscape too, in your own quiet way. The imagined water becomes weight. The dimness becomes a closed room. The slope becomes a path your mind does not have to climb. Every detail of the Komodo volcanic reef slopes is allowed to pass slowly by, and none of it demands that you hold on. The story keeps descending, even if you drift in and out of it. Below us, the sand shows a field of tiny mounds, each made by an animal moving or feeding beneath the surface. Burrowing worms oxygenate sediments and recycle organic material. Small crustaceans sort particles. Mollusks leave delicate tracks. Bacteria transform what larger animals cannot use. The bottom may look soft and plain, but it is chemically and physically active, a living skin stretched over volcanic ground. That living skin connects the reef to the deeper sea. Material from the Komodo volcanic reef slopes can slide, drift, or be carried downward, feeding animals beyond the coral zone. Larvae from deeper or shallower habitats may pass through on currents. Fish may move up and down the slope with day, night, season, or temperature. The slope is a corridor, not a wall, and water is the corridor's breath. We follow that breath into another quieter reach, where a few black corals branch from the rock like ink drawn into water. Their skeletons may be dark, though their living tissue can be pale or colored, and their growth is often slow. Many form branching structures that provide habitat for other small species. In the dimness, they seem almost like winter trees, except the season here is made of depth, not cold air. A long-nosed hawkfish may perch among those branches, if the place suits it, resting with pectoral fins like small hands. It watches the water, then shifts to another branch, with a short, controlled movement. Its body is adapted to life among coral frameworks, and it uses the structure as both lookout and shelter. You see it, then lose it, then see it again. The reef teaches attention by withholding. This withholding is not refusal. It is part of the calm. The Komodo volcanic reef slopes do not show everything at once because no real landscape does. A forest does not show every root. A mountain does not show every seam of stone. The ocean does not show every animal in its dark rooms. It lets us receive a little, and then a little more, at the pace our senses can bear. As we pass the black coral, the slope briefly steepens, and the water feels more open beside us. To one side is rock, to the other is blue darkness, a spacious drop where particles drift in slow procession. Pelagic fish may pass there, using the slope as an edge along their route. Their bodies remain just beyond clear sight, silhouettes turning and fading in the distance. Edges are important in the sea, where reef meets open water, food, shelter, and movement meet. Small fish feed near the structure and retreat into it. Larger fish patrol the boundary. Plankton is carried against the slope. Currents rise and shear. The Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes are full of such edges, and each one creates an opportunity for life to gather without ever needing a sharp boundary line. You can rest at this edge for a moment. The open water is not empty. It is simply less furnished than the reef. It holds drifting eggs, larvae, jelly forms, transparent animals, fish in passage, and tiny planktonic bodies rising or sinking with the hour. Some are nearly invisible, built from clear tissue so they can vanish in the blue. The ocean makes transparency into a kind of quiet. A comb jelly may drift beyond the reef, its rows of cilia scattering faint rainbow light when the angle is right. It has no need for bones, no need for hurry, only a gelatinous body moving with delicate pulses through the water. In another kind of story, it might seem strange, but here it belongs completely. The deep ocean is generous with forms that feel like dreams before sleep. The reef slope and the open water exchange lives constantly. Many reef fish begin as larvae drifting in the plankton, tiny and transparent, carried by currents before settling back to a reef by chemical cues, sound and chance. Coral larvae also drift before finding a place to attach. The Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes are not isolated gardens. They are connected to the moving sea from their first beginnings. You can imagine a larva no larger than a speck, sensing the presence of suitable reef, descending toward rock touched by coralline algae, and beginning a life fixed in place. From that small settlement, a coral colony can grow for years, adding calcium carbonate beneath its living tissue. Tiny beginnings become shelves, branches, domes, and shelter for other creatures. The slope is built by countless arrivals that stayed, and we continue downward where fewer coral larvae choose to settle because light is lower and the conditions are different. Other larvae choose these depths instead. Sponges, worms, bryozoans, tunicates, bivalves, and soft corals find their places. Each depth has its own invitation. The Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes are a vertical arrangement of welcomes, from sunlit shallows to shadowed stone. The water around us is very quiet now. Not silent exactly, but quiet in the way a room becomes quiet when everyone inside is breathing slowly. The reef sounds are distant. The current is broad and low. The light is soft enough that forms seem to arrive from thought rather than from vision. Your body can sink more deeply into rest while the story keeps just enough shape to carry you. A small cluster of tunicates rests on the rock, each individual like a soft, transparent vessel with two openings. Water enters, food is filtered, and water leaves. Some tunicates live alone, and some live in colonies that look like pale stars, or glassy beads arranged across the surface. They are simple in outline, but their filtering helps clear and transform the water, participating in the reef's hidden circulation. Tunicates remind us that bodies can be humble and essential at the same time. They do not need bright colors or dramatic motion. They draw the sea through themselves and take what they need. On the Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes, this quiet feeding is everywhere, repeated in sponges, bivalves, worms, soft corals, and countless microscopic lives. The reef is always drinking the sea. You may feel that image settle over your breathing. Inhale, and the water passes through the reef. Exhale, and the water leaves changed. The body becomes less separate from the rhythm of filtration, current, and rest. There is no hurry to identify the next animal. It will appear when it appears, like a thought, rising gently and then returning to the dark. A pale anemone opens near the base of a rock. Its tentacles spread in a soft circle. A small fish may hover among them, protected by mucus and familiarity. Tiny shrimps may share the tentacles, their transparent bodies marked with fine lines. The anemone is both animal and shelter, both mouth and home. On the Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes, many forms hold more than one role. The anemone's tentacles move with the water, each one armed with stinging cells used to catch food and discourage unwanted touch. Yet in our calm gaze there is no alarm in that fact. It is only biology, a way of being suited to the sea. The tentacles open like a flower, close when needed, and open again. Function and beauty are not separate here. They drift together in the current. We pass without touching because observation is enough. The reef does not need our hands. It is complete in its own contact with water, stone, and light. You can let that restraint become part of the sleep. To watch gently, to want nothing from the place. To let the Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes remain themselves, descending in darkness, holding their lives in forms we only partly understand. Below the anemone, a darker channel crosses the slope. It may carry sediment during stronger tides, guiding material downward like a small underwater path. The sides of the channel are edged with sponges and low corals, where the current scours the rock clean enough for attachment. In the center, fine sand lies smoother, occasionally marked by the trail of a snail or the star-shaped imprint of a resting animal. A cone snail may move somewhere in such sand, slow and beautifully patterned, though we keep the mood soft and do not linger on sharpness. Its shell is a record of growth, spiraled and exact, made from minerals drawn through the animal's body. Shells are quiet architecture. They protect, weigh, balance, and remain after the animal is gone, becoming shelter for others or fragments in future sand. On the Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes, shells are part of the bottom's memory. A gastropod shell may become a hermit crab's home. A broken bivalve may shelter a worm. Small fragments may grind down into pale grains that mix with volcanic sand. The reef keeps reusing its own materials, not in a circle drawn neatly, but in overlapping spirals of growth, use, breakage, and return. You can feel the spiral in the descent. We move downward, but the story loops gently through similar themes: stone, water, current, shelter, food, light, and rest. Each return is slightly deeper. Each detail is dimmer and quieter. This is how sleep often comes, through repetition with small changes, until the mind stops asking for novelty and begins to accept the slow turning. The channel leads us toward a lower terrace where scattered rocks sit like old steps. Each rock holds a different small community depending on height, exposure, and surface. One is covered mostly in sponge, another holds a sea fan, another has a crust of coralline algae and a few tube worms. Another is bare on one side and living on the other, because even a few centimeters can change the current. Tube worms extend crowns into the water, feathery and delicate, then withdraw quickly into their tubes when touched by shadow or vibration. Their tubes may be calcareous or built from grains, anchored to rock or coral. When open, they look like tiny flowers, filtering particles from the sea. When closed, they become small, sealed doors. The Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes are filled with doors opening and closing in quiet. You do not need to count them. Let them open and close outside the edge of attention. Let the water move over them. Let the terrace pass beneath us. The dimness is thick enough now that every pale crown and sponge edge seems to glow slightly by contrast, although no true light comes from them. The mind makes its own gentleness when there is little to see. A sea pen may appear in softer sediment, rooted below the surface, its upper body rising like a quill or feather into the water. Sea pens are colonial animals related to soft corals, and each visible form is made of many polyps living together. Some can withdraw into the sediment when disturbed, some glow faintly when touched or moved, though we leave their light undisturbed, only imagining its possibility. The presence of sea pens tells us the bottom has changed again. It is soft enough to anchor in, open enough for feeding, and supplied by currents that bring suspended food. The Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes blur here toward deeper sediment habitats, and the reef's hard architecture gives way to animals that live partly buried, partly lifted into the flow. The landscape is still volcanic in origin, but its surface has become tender. You can feel that tenderness in the language of the place. Sand instead of wall, drift instead of dart. The animals are not fragile in the helpless sense. They are adapted, precise, and suited to their depth. But the visual mood is softer now, and the body responds, loosening further into warmth above the blanket, while the imagined sea remains cool around you. Farther along the terrace, a small sea star crosses the sediment with invisible effort. Its arms press and release. Its tube feet work beneath it in hundreds of tiny decisions. It may take a long time to move beyond a stone. Time does not trouble it. The Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes have many clocks, and this is one of them, slow enough that the human mind can finally rest beside it. The sea star's body is arranged around a center, without the front and back urgency that shapes many faster animals. It senses chemically, it moves by hydraulic pressure in a water vascular system using seawater within its own internal channels. This is a lovely thought for an ocean sleep story, that an animal can move by carrying the sea through itself, letting water become motion, touch, and direction. We carry the sea through the story in a similar way. Each paragraph is another small current. Each image lifts and settles. Your attention does not have to hold the whole reef at once. It can hold only the sea star, then only the sand, then only the coolness, then only the quiet word that comes next. The descent continues, soft and unbroken. The Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes now feel far from the surface, though the surface remains above us, distant and silver in memory. If a wave passes there, we do not feel its shape directly. If the wind moves over the island, it is only a rumor. Down here, the world is governed by tide, pressure, density, and the slow exchange of food and breath among living bodies. The island's dry hills are gone from sight, but their volcanic roots are still beneath us. That connection between dry hill and underwater slope is part of the wonder. A landscape does not stop at the shoreline. It passes through surf, descends into reef, falls into channels, and continues toward deeper basins. The Komodo Islands above may hold grasses, scrub, stone, and hot sunlight, while below them the same earth supports sponges, corals, fish, and soft animals opening in cold blue shadow. One landform, two dreams. We linger near the slope's lower edge, where the incline relaxes and sediment thickens. The reef patches are now farther apart, like quiet houses with dark fields between them. A few fish move from one patch to another, choosing low routes close to the bottom. Their shadows slide over sand and vanish. Nothing announces itself loudly. The whole place seems to prefer being half seen. A small cuttlefish settles near a stone and changes its skin to match the surrounding grains. Waves of tone move across its body, then become still. Its eyes are calm and watchful, shaped differently from ours, reading polarization and contrast in ways we can only imagine. When it lifts and glides forward, the fins along its sides ripple like the edge of a soft ribbon. Cuttlefish belong to the same larger group as octopuses and squid, animals of flexible bodies and remarkable perception. On the Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes, they may hunt small crustaceans and fish, communicate with color changes, and disappear against complex backgrounds. Yet here, in our quiet descent, the most beautiful thing is not speed or skill, it is the way the animal becomes the bottom, then separates again like a thought becoming clear. We descend a little more, and the sand takes up more of the view. The volcanic grains absorb light, the pale shell fragments give a faint dusting of contrast, a few holes mark the presence of burrowers. The water remains full of fine drifting matter, and the darkness is no longer something ahead of us. It is all around, even and calm, holding every shape at the same depth of attention. The lower Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes are a place where the grand and the minute meet without ceremony. Plate tectonics, volcanism, ocean currents, coral growth, bacterial metabolism, fish behavior, and the settling of one grain of sand all belong to the same scene. You do not have to choose between them. The mind can drift from immense forces to tiny openings, and each scale leads quietly into the next. This is why the deep reef feels peaceful rather than empty. It is not a blankness, it is a gathering of slower processes. What lives here has adjusted to fewer certainties, less light, cooler water, and food that moves with tides and seasons. The animals do not complain about this. They are shaped by it. Their bodies are answers written in calcium, tissue, pigment, mucus, and patience. A snail crosses the sediment, leaving a shining trace that fades behind it. Its shell tilts slightly with each movement. The foot beneath it glides over a layer of mucus, making travel possible across loose grains. It may feed on algae films, detritus, or small organisms, depending on its kind. To us, it is a slow mark moving through darkness, another line in the reef's night writing. Above the snail, a small hovering fish picks at particles in the water. It rises, turns, and settles again near a stone. Its movements are economical, each one matched to the current. You can watch how little it needs to do to stay alive in this moment. A fin flick, a mouth opening, a return to shelter. The slope provides the rest. Carrying food through the blue hush, we move onward, and the Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes continue their gradual surrender into deeper seabed. There is no clear final border yet, only thinning coral, more sediment, and wider intervals of darkness. The story is not concluding. It is simply following the natural softening of the landscape, staying with the place as it changes character and descends beyond the bright reef's familiar forms. A dark sponge sits beside a pale shell, and a brittle star's arm trails from beneath the sponge like a narrow piece of living string. The arm curls, uncurls, and tastes the water. It can sense chemicals, touch, and movement, gathering information from the passing sea. The rest of the animal remains hidden, safe in the crevice. Many lives here are like that, partly extended, partly protected, meeting the world with only what they need. You can meet sleep that way too. Only part of the mind remains at the edge of the story. The rest withdraws into warmth, into pillow, into the dark shelter behind the eyes. The Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes keep offering quiet details, but they do not require full wakefulness. They are patient enough to be heard by someone drifting in and out, catching one image, then another, then letting both go. A gentle current turns us along the base of a rock face. The face is not high now, but it is rough, pitted, and alive in patches. Small white spirals of worm tubes mark the surface. Encrusting algae forms hard pink crusts where light still allows it. A few soft corals cling to the side. Tiny amphipods move in crevices too small for clear sight. The rock is a city of miniature rooms. The volcanic origin of the rock gives it texture that life can use. Cracks from cooling, fractures from weathering, holes made larger by boring organisms, and surfaces roughened by mineral changes all become places for attachment and shelter. Over time, biological and geological processes become difficult to separate. A coral settles on stone. A boring sponge enters coral. Algae cements rubble. Sediment fills gaps. The slope becomes a living geology. This living geology is what makes the Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes feel ancient without feeling still. They are constantly being remade, but in motion slow enough to feel like calm. A polyp divides. A sponge grows a millimeter. A fish clears a burrow entrance. A current shifts a fan of sand. Each action is small, yet together they change the face of the underwater hillside. We pass a small overhang where a sleeping parrotfish may rest at night, perhaps wrapped in a mucus cocoon that helps mask scent and protect its body. In daylight, it would graze the reef above, scraping algae and contributing to sand. Here we only imagine it resting in a crevice, colors muted by darkness, body held in still water. Even bright fish have a quiet night. Rest is part of the reef's ecology. Many animals reduce movement when light changes. Some hide, some emerge, some migrate upward. Some settle into sand. The whole reef reorganizes after dusk, not with a single signal we can hear, but through countless internal clocks and sensory cues. Light fades and behavior changes. Current strengthens and bodies open. Moonlight comes and spawning may follow in certain seasons. The moon is far above us now, but its influence can reach into reef life through tides and timing. Corals in many places release eggs and sperm in synchronized events linked to lunar cycles, temperature, and season. Fish may spawn with currents that carry larvae away from the reef. The Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes are tied to the sky. Even when the sky is invisible, darkness does not mean separation. You can imagine the moonlight trembling on the surface, too faint to reach us clearly, yet still part of the system. Above, a pale path lies across water between islands. Below, animals respond in ways written into their bodies. The surface and depth, the moon and tide, the reef and open sea all remain connected by rhythms older than memory. We rest inside those rhythms. The slope below becomes softer again, and our descent slows as if the water itself is thickening around us. There are fewer vertical faces now, more low mounds and sedimented hollows. Sea cucumbers are more common across this quieter ground. Some lie like dark loaves. Some are patterned with pale bumps. Some move so slowly that you recognize motion only by comparing them with where they were before. Sea cucumbers feed by taking sediment into the mouth, extracting organic material, and returning cleaner grains behind them. It is humble work, but it matters. They help process seafloor sediments, influence microbial communities, and recycle nutrients. On the Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes, they are part of the unseen maintenance that lets the bottom remain alive rather than clogged with unused material. They are slow keepers of balance. You may find peace in animals that do not perform. A sea cucumber does not sparkle, it does not hurry, it does not need to be framed by drama. It rests, moves, feeds, and changes the sand by passing through it. The deep reef is full of such lives, and listening to them in language lets the mind settle into a broader idea of worth, one that has nothing to do with speed. A thin worm extends from the sediment, then withdraws. A small crab lifts a grain, turns it, drops it. A fish settles behind a stone and becomes shadow. These are not events in the usual sense. They are textures of presence. The Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes at this depth are made from thousands of such almost events, each one too gentle to wake the water, yet enough to keep the ecosystem breathing. The water grows darker, though not empty. There is a faint sense of blue above and black below, with our drifting path held between them. We are near the place where reef slope becomes deeper seafloor, where volcanic ancestry, coral history, and sediment rain come together. The pressure remains steady around us. It asks nothing. It only surrounds a calm enclosure without edge. As we move through this calm enclosure, another cluster of life appears on a low rock, a small anemone, a sponge with many openings, a few feather stars folded tight, a crab tucked beneath the lip. The rock may be no larger than a cushion, yet it changes the whole immediate neighborhood. Flow bends around it, food collects, shelter appears, the seafloor becomes more varied. Variation is one of the gifts of the Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes. A smooth slope would hold fewer possibilities. A broken slope, a volcanic slope, a slope with ledges, sand pockets, rubble fields, and hard outcrops creates options for many kinds of bodies. Some need light, some need shade, some need loose grains, some need firm attachment, some need fast water. Some need calm pockets where fine food can settle. You can feel this as a kind of kindness in the landscape, though the reef itself is not trying to be kind. It simply offers complexity, and life answers. The old volcanic landform creates conditions, and living things occupy them in ways both predictable and surprising. We drift among those answers as quietly as possible, letting each one appear, remain, and pass behind us. A faint flash crosses the water column, perhaps a small fish turning, perhaps a particle catching light, perhaps a tiny bioluminescent response to movement. It is gone almost before it becomes an image. That is enough. In the lower reef, light is most beautiful when it is brief. It does not need to conquer the dark, it only marks the dark for a moment, then returns it to stillness. The Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes, with their currents and nutrient-rich waters, are part of a broader region where productivity supports many forms of marine life. Manta rays may feed in nearby channels where plankton gathers, reef fish bloom over coral gardens, and deeper communities receive the rain of material from above. We stay on the slope, but the slope belongs to that wider breathing system, connected by water moving through island passages. You might imagine far above and away, a manta turning through plankton-rich water with wing-like fins, filtering the sea in wide circles. Down here, The same productivity arrives in smaller portions, as particles, larvae, and drifting life. The grand animal and the tiny polyp share a source. They are both held by the currents of Komodo, both shaped by the meeting of waters between oceans. That meeting of waters is central to the place. The Indonesian seas form passages between the Pacific and Indian Oceans, and water moving through them carries heat, salt, nutrients, and life. Around islands like Komodo, constricted channels intensify the flow. To the reef, this is not a map. It is daily experience, felt as pressure, food, temperature, and motion. We feel it now as a slow sideways pull. The slope remains below us, but our path curves with the water. A soft coral bends, a feather star opens a little. Fine particles slide past at an angle. The current does not rush, it guides. In the sleep of the story, this guidance is enough to keep us moving without effort, as if the sea itself were turning a page. The page opens onto a lower field of volcanic sand. There are fewer rocks here, and the ones that remain are rounded by growth and sediment. A few burrows mark the surface. A small shrimp stands at one entrance, antennae extended like pale threads into the water. Beside it, a goby hovers close, keeping watch with movements so small they seem almost imagined. Shrimp-goby partnerships are common in many Indo-Pacific sandy habitats. The shrimp maintains the burrow, moving grains and keeping the passage open, while the goby watches for changes in the surroundings. They communicate through touch, often with the shrimp's antenna resting against the fish. On the Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes, such a partnership turns loose sediment into shared shelter, a tiny household built from trust and attention. You can picture that antenna touching the goby's tail, a line of contact finer than a strand of hair. The shrimp cannot see well compared with the fish, but it can feel the signal. The fish benefits from the burrow. Together they make a way to live in the open sand. The arrangement is practical, but from our drifting distance, it feels quiet and intimate, like two beings keeping one small doorway. The doorway closes slightly as we pass. The shrimp backs down, the goby lowers itself. Sand settles around the entrance. We continue, leaving them their dark room. The reef does not need us to witness everything, and perhaps the most peaceful parts of it are the ones that return to privacy after a brief glimpse. The Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes are full of private rooms. As the slope relaxes further, the reef's colors are mostly memory. What remains is contrast, contour, and the occasional pale living surface. You may still see a small yellow sponge, though the color is muted. You may still see a fish stripe, though it has softened. The deep water edits the visual world toward fewer demands. It gives the mind less to sort and more to feel. This is one reason underwater landscapes suit sleep. The body understands immersion. It understands being held evenly, surrounded on every side, released from the sharp uprightness of the day. In our imagined descent along the Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes, there is no falling in the harsh sense, no impact, no alarm. There is only suspension, pressure, coolness, and a slow yielding of light. A few planktonic animals drift past us, transparent and delicate. They may be larval fish, salps, copepods, or small gelatinous forms, each one living in the water itself rather than on the reef. Some pulse, some glide. Some are carried almost entirely by flow. Their bodies are so soft and clear that they seem made from the idea of water, briefly organized, then returned to water. These drifting animals link the slope to the open sea. Reef fish feed on them. Corals and sponges capture smaller particles. Larger animals follow the plankton where it gathers. Some plankton will settle and become bottom dwellers if they survive the journey. The distinction between floating life and attached life is not permanent for many species. It is a stage, a chapter, a form taken for a while. We pass through them slowly, or rather they pass around us, because in the sea it is not always clear who is moving and who is being moved. The current carries all. The Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes rest beneath, yet even they are part of motion across geological time, lifted, fractured, colonized, eroded, and covered. Stillness and movement are not opposites here. They are layers of the same place. A low mound of coral rubble appears ahead, partly covered by algae and sponge. Small fish dart in and out, but their movements remain soft in the dimness. A juvenile sweetlips may hover there, patterned and wavering, its body moving with a flutter that resembles a leaf. Young reef fish often look different from adults, using patterns and motions suited to their early lives among sheltering structures. The reef is full of young forms hidden among older structures. Juvenile fish in rubble, new coral polyps on crusted rock, larvae settling into crevices, sponge growth along dead coral. The Komodo volcanic reef slopes are not only ancient, they are continually beginning. Even in the darkening lower reaches, small beginnings occur in protected places where the current brings food and the surface is just right. You can rest with that thought without turning it into hope too loudly. Beginning does not always look bright. Sometimes it is a tiny polyp in low light, a shrimp clearing sand, a worm extending from sediment, a bacterial film forming on stone. The quietest beginnings may be the ones most suited to sleep because they do not ask to be celebrated. They simply start. The mound falls behind us and the seafloor smooths again. A soft haze lies close to the bottom where fine particles have been lifted and are settling. The haze makes the world appear slightly blurred, as if the ocean has lowered a veil between one thought and the next. You can feel your attention pass through that veil. Slower now, easier, less attached to the surface. On the Komodo volcanic reef slopes, such suspended sediment can come from currents, animal movement, or material sliding from higher ground. It may reduce clarity for a while, but it is also part of the natural exchange of the slope. Some organisms tolerate it well, others choose positions where water clears it away. The reef is always balancing sediment and flow, attachment and burial, exposure and shelter. A small bivalve opens slightly from within the sediment, filtering water through siphons. You might see only two faint openings, almost invisible among the grains. Yet inside the shell, water passes, food is collected, and the animal continues its hidden life. Much of the lower slope is like this, alive through openings rather than obvious bodies. The seafloor breathes through pores, siphons, burrows, and mouths. We drift lower still, and the topic remains the same, though its face has changed. What lives in the Komodo volcanic reef slopes is not only the bright fish of the upper reef, not only corals and sea fans, but also the sediment feeders, burrowers, filterers, night movers, and almost invisible animals that keep the deeper slope alive. The answer becomes quieter as we descend, but it grows more complete. The water around us is now a deep blue-gray. If you imagine looking at your hand, it is still there, but softened, as though made from the same dimness as the surrounding sea. The pressure is steady, the coolness is even. The only movement is the current and the slow procession of the bottom beneath us. We remain with it, unhurried, and the slope continues to open downward. A pale crinoid unfolds from a rock, arms spreading into the current with exquisite slowness. Each arm bears many fine branches, increasing the surface available for catching food. Particles touch the arms and are passed along grooves toward the mouth. The animal may seem plant-like, but it is entirely animal, a living net shaped by ancient evolutionary memory and present hunger. It opens because the water is right. Crinoids have old roots in the history of life, with relatives known from ancient seas long before coral reefs took their modern forms. Seeing one on the Komodo volcanic reef slopes is like seeing a soft echo from deep time. Yet, it is not a fossil, not a leftover, not a symbol. It is alive now, responding to this current, this night, this exact flow of food along volcanic stone. You can let the phrase alive now become very gentle. The ancient and the present meet in one moving arm. The reef's geological past and the animal's evolutionary past meet in one quiet feeding posture. Your own present moment meets them through listening, while the room around you recedes. The sea holds all these times together without effort. The crinoid remains behind as we drift on. Below it, the slope is less steep, and the sediment is finer. Sea pens appear again, along with scattered small anemones and low sponges. A few fish hover close to the bottom, their bodies angled into the current. The Komodo volcanic reef slopes are nearing the kind of deep quiet where the reef is no longer dominant, yet its influence still arrives as fragments, nutrients, and sheltering stones. This gradual transition matters because ecosystems rarely end cleanly. They blend. The lower reef feeds the upper sediment. The sediment hosts animals that feed fish from the reef. Currents connect patches separated by darkness. A creature may spend one life stage in open water, another on reef, another near sand. The boundaries we name are useful for thinking, but the sea moves through them freely. You can let yourself move through boundaries freely too. Wakefulness into drowsiness, listening into dreaming, body into bed, reef into slope, slope into sand. The transitions do not need firm edges. They are more peaceful when they are gradual, when one state becomes another before you have to name the change. The Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes teach this without speaking. A small cluster of shells rests in a hollow. Some are empty, some may hold hermit crabs. Some are partly buried. Their surfaces catch faint light along curved rims, then fall back into shadow. Shells always feel like held sound, though here they hold only water and memory. They are the remains of animals, but they are also future homes, future sand, future chemistry in the slow recycling of the reef. Calcium carbonate moves through this ecosystem in many forms. Corals build it, mollusks shape it into shells, algae deposit it in crusts, grazers break it down, waves and currents carry fragments, sediment stores it, dissolution returns some of it to seawater. On the Komodo volcanic reef slopes, mineral and life pass through one another so steadily that neither can be understood alone. We pass over the hollow without stopping. The shells remain. A hermit crab withdraws into one, sealing the opening with a claw. A worm threads beneath another. A tiny fish uses the shadow between them. The hollow seems still, but it is a small convergence of use, abandonment, and renewal. The lower slope is full of such convergences, small enough to miss, complete enough to matter. The current eases, and for a while we seem almost suspended in place. Particles drift more vertically now, sinking in slow, uneven paths. The sand below becomes a soft field of dim marks. The old volcanic incline continues faintly, but we no longer feel the drama of a steep descent. We are gliding along the lower shoulder of the underwater island, where the reef's voice has become low and continuous. This is not the abyssal plain yet. Komodo's reef slopes still hold the memory of island, current, and coral above us, but the mood has begun to resemble deeper water. More of the food arrives from elsewhere. More of the life is hidden, slow or low to the bottom. More of the landscape is shaped by settling than by upward growth. The descent has entered a hushed chapter. A sea cucumber lifts feeding tentacles at its mouth, each one touching sediment and bringing food inward. The movement is repetitive and nearly hypnotic. Tentacle to sand, tentacle to mouth, tentacle to sand again. We do not make the repetition sharp. We let it be rounded and continuous, one soft action folded into the next. This is the reef's lullaby at the lower edge, the feeding of a patient animal in dark water. Nearby, a small, brittle star moves from beneath the stone, its arms testing the surface ahead. It can move surprisingly quickly when needed, but tonight it only crosses a short distance and settles under another lip of rock. The Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes give it many such lips. Even the smallest relief in the bottom becomes shelter, shade, and a point from which to meet the passing current. The idea of shelter becomes softer the deeper we go. It is not only protection, it is the right fit between body and place. A burrow fits a shrimp, a coral branch fits a hawkfish, a sponge channel fits bacteria, a sea fan fits a seahorse, a bed fits a tired body. Each one is a resting shape, a place where effort can reduce and presence can continue without strain. We drift onward, and the volcanic sand grows darker again beneath us. The pale pieces of coral become fewer, or perhaps less visible. A long trail crosses the bottom, made by something that has already passed. The maker is gone, but the trail remains for a while, proof of movement, written in the softest possible script. The current will erase it later. There is no need to preserve every mark. This temporary writing is part of the seafloor's beauty. Tracks, mounds, feeding pits, burrow openings, and resting impressions appear and fade. They show that life is active even when animals are hidden. Scientists can learn from such traces but tonight we receive them simply as signs of quiet occupancy. The lower Komodo volcanic reef slopes are inhabited not only by bodies, but by evidence of bodies moving carefully through darkness. A small eel threads across the path ahead and disappears under a rock. Its movement is smooth, almost ribbon-like, a curve becoming another curve. Eels use crevices well, slipping through spaces many fish cannot enter. Their bodies are suited to the reef's hidden architecture. In the dimness, the eel becomes less an animal to identify and more a line of motion drawn briefly across the slope. The rock where it vanishes is covered on one side by a thin sponge and on the other by bare mineral surface dusted with sediment. This difference may come from current direction, grazing, light, or chance settlement. Surfaces in the sea are contested and shared, opened and occupied over time. A bare patch today may hold larvae tomorrow. A sponge may overgrow algae. A coral may claim a little space. Space is precious on hard reef, but less so on soft sediment, where the challenge is often stability and shelter. The Komodo volcanic reef slopes contain both kinds of problem, and life answers each differently. On rock, attach firmly. In sand, burrow or blend. In current, bend and feed. In darkness, sense chemically. In complexity, remember your route. Every animal carries a small solution in its body. You can let those solutions drift past without memorizing them. The reef does not test you. It only accompanies you downward. If you wake later and remember only one image, a sea fan in blue dark, a shrimp at a burrow, a pale sea pen rising from volcanic sand, that is enough. The rest can remain in the water, moving slowly where the mind no longer follows. And as we continue along the lower Komodo volcanic reef slopes, the darkness grows smoother and the scene becomes quieter still. The sand is broad, the stones are scattered, the current is low. A few living forms open into it, each one placed where food and footing meet. Above us, the bright reef is distant, but not gone, because everything that falls from it still belongs to this deeper ground. A faint shower of particles continues around us. Some specks spiral, some sink straight down, some rise briefly in a slow eddy, then descend again. Marine snow can take days or weeks to fall from upper waters, depending on size, density, and how often it is eaten or repackaged along the way. By the time it reaches these depths, it has already passed through many lives, becoming softer, smaller, and more shared. The animals here accept that shared food without ceremony. A sea pen catches it. A sponge filters it. A worm gathers it. Bacteria transform it. A small fish takes the animal that fed on it. Energy moves quietly from sunlight above to bodies below, changing forms until it becomes movement, growth, eggs, shells, and sediment. Even darkness depends on the sun, though the connection is long and gentle. You can rest inside that long connection. Sunlight over Komodo, plankton in the water, coral polyps opening, fish feeding, particles falling, sea cucumbers crossing sand. The chain is not a straight line, but a drifting web, and you are following one strand downward through the sleeping sea. The strand does not pull. It only guides, soft as a thread in water. The lower slope bends around another outcrop, and we pass close enough to see a cluster of small white cup corals attached beneath the shadowed lip. Unlike many shallow reef-building corals, some cup corals do not depend strongly on symbiotic algae and can live in dimmer places, feeding directly from the water. Their tentacles may open at night, each cup a small pale mouth in the dark. These corals remind us that the word coral holds many lives. Some build broad sunlit reefs with algae in their tissues. Some live alone or in small clusters in low light. Some are soft, some branching, some encrusting, some solitary. On the Komodo volcanic reef slopes, this variety lets coral life continue across changes in depth, current, and illumination, though each form has its own needs and limits. We look at the cup corals only briefly, because the descent keeps moving. Their pale circles fade behind us. The outcrop becomes a darker shape. The sand opens again. You may feel the story becoming less crowded now, with more space between images, more water between words. The quiet is not an ending. It is simply the slope speaking in a lower register, and we follow its voice. A crab crosses a patch of sand sideways, carrying its body close to the bottom. Its legs make small marks that the current softens almost immediately. Crabs are recyclers, feeders, cleaners, opportunists, and residents of countless crevices. Some pick at detritus, some graze, some catch small animals. In our calm telling, this crab is only crossing from one shadow to another, taking its night path across the reef's lower edge. The Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes hold many such night paths. By day, the reef may appear dominated by fish and coral. By night, crustaceans, worms, mollusks, echinoderms, and hidden fish emerge, changing the visible community. The reef has more than one face, and each face belongs to a different light. We are in the face of low light now, where legs, antennae, and tube feet become more common than bright fins. You can feel your own night face arriving. The daytime self, with its lists and edges, is farther away. The listening self is slower, more receptive, less concerned with finishing a thought. It follows the crab until the crab disappears. It follows the current until the current turns. It follows the Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes because the path is downward, and downward feels like sleep. Another cooler ribbon of water passes, and the animals respond in ways too subtle to dramatize. A feather star opens wider, a soft coral bends. Fine sediment lifts from the sand and settles in a new pattern. Temperature can signal upwelling, current changes, or water mass movement, and even small shifts matter to animals living near their preferred conditions. The reef reads these changes without language. We read them through sensation, coolness along the arms, pressure at the ears, a hush around the body, dim light above, dark sand below, the imagined smell of salt and wet stone, the faint graininess of suspended particles in the water. These sensory details hold the descent together, keeping us close to the Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes. Even as the scene becomes sparse, the outcrops ahead are lower still, and some are covered mostly in sediment, with only the tops exposed. A sponge grows on one exposed point, angled into the current. A little cluster of hydroids covers another, fine and branching, with tiny polyps extended. Hydroids are relatives of jellyfish and corals, often overlooked, sometimes delicate enough to resemble pale underwater moss. They catch small prey from the flow and add fine texture to the stone. Hydroids, bryozoans, and other small colonial animals help fill the spaces between larger, more familiar forms. They turn bare surfaces into living surfaces. They provide microhabitats, influence flow at tiny scales, and participate in the dense layering of reef life. On the Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes, the beauty is not only in the obvious animals, it is in the fine growths that make rock feel softly furred with life. You can imagine looking very closely, so closely that the reef face becomes a forest of miniature branches, openings, crowns, and threads. Then you can imagine pulling back, letting that forest become one muted patch on a stone, then one stone on a slope, then one slope beneath an island, then one island chain between oceans. The mind moves outward and inward like tide. We sink with that tide, though the motion remains gentle. The lower slope is now a broad, dim incline where the reef's hard structures appear only occasionally. The Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes are still present in the angle of the bottom, the origin of the sand, and the scattered life that clings where rock breaks through. But the mood is shifting toward the deeper seafloor, where silence has more room to settle. A small anemone retracts slightly as a particle touches it, then opens again. The motion is slow, almost like a sigh. A worm crown closes nearby. A fish turns once under a ledge. The current continues. You can feel how each reaction is measured. Nothing wastes energy. Nothing needs to fill the dark with activity. The deepening ecosystem is a lesson in using only what the moment requires. That lesson may follow you into sleep. Use only the breath you need. Hold only the thought that stays softly. Let the rest drift down like marine snow, to be transformed somewhere beyond conscious attention. The reef does this constantly. It lets matter fall, receives it, changes it, and releases what it cannot hold. The mind can do the same. A last brighter fish passes from a higher patch of reef, moving down along the slope before turning back toward shelter. It seems briefly out of place in the dimmer zone, like a memory from above. Its color is muted, but you can still sense the orange or yellow hidden inside the blue-gray light. Then it turns, catches a faint gleam, and disappears behind a rock. The Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes are full of such vertical visitors. Fish may move between depths to feed, avoid bright light, follow plankton, or find resting places. Some animals have narrow preferred zones, while others travel across them. The slope allows this movement because it is continuous, a descending pathway rather than separate rooms stacked apart. It lets life choose depth as conditions change. We drift past the rock where the fish vanished. Behind it, there is a pocket of still water with fine sediment gathered like dust. A small shrimp stands there barely moving, its body translucent enough to show a faint inner line. It lifts one claw, cleans an antenna, and settles again. The gesture is tiny and complete, a whole life moment contained in stillness. The lower reef is generous with completeness, a shrimp cleaning itself, a worm opening, a sea cucumber feeding, a sponge filtering. These do not feel like fragments when you slow down enough. They are entire events at the scale of the animals living them. The human need for large drama loosens here, and the smaller rhythms begin to feel sufficient, even spacious. As the slope eases further, the old volcanic reef becomes a chain of scattered memories across the bottom. A coral fragment here, a dark stone there, a sponge on a rise, a few shells caught in a shallow depression. The Komodo volcanic reef slopes have not disappeared. They have spread themselves into sediment, traces, and low relief. The descent continues through what the reef has shed and what the sea has kept. A fine layer of organic material lies across some grains, invisible except in the way animals gather there. Bacteria live in this thin boundary, transforming carbon and nutrients. Tiny grazers feed on films, larger animals feed on the grazers. The surface of sediment is not a passive floor. It is a chemical meeting place between water above and buried layers below, and much of its work happens beyond sight. You can think of it as a quiet skin. The seafloor skin breathes differently from ours, but it separates and connects at the same time. Above it, oxygenated water moves. Below it, buried organic matter changes. Through it, worms, burrowers, microbes, and chemical gradients make exchanges. On the Komodo volcanic reef slopes, even the softest bottom has depth beneath its surface. We hover close to that skin, and for a moment there is almost nothing to describe except texture. The faint ripple of sand, the dark grains, the pale flecks, the slow drift of particles, the cool pressure, the absence of hurry. This almost nothing is not empty. It is where the listener can finally loosen completely, where the landscape becomes simple enough to hold the body in calm. Then, from a small hole, two antennae emerge. They test the water, withdraw, emerge again. The animal remains unseen, but its awareness reaches outward. Many reef lives begin with sensing before moving, tasting the chemistry of the water, feeling vibration, detecting current and shadow. You do not need to know its name. It is enough to notice that the slope is still inhabited, even when it offers only a pair of pale lines. The Komodo volcanic reef slopes at this depth reward that kind of noticing. They ask less from vision and more from patience. A half-asleep listener can miss a sentence, return, and still find the water moving. A fish will still be hovering. A sponge will still be filtering. A current will still be carrying the story downward. The place is stable enough to hold us gently. We turn slightly with the current, and a dim rock face slides into view. It is lower than the others, but its underside shelters a small gathering of nocturnal life. A crab, a worm crown, a tiny fish, a pale sponge, a few cup corals with tentacles open. Each one occupies a different surface, yet all share the same shadow, the same moving water, the same quiet shelter. The cup corals feed from the passing current. The crab picks along the rock. The sponge draws water inward. The fish holds position. The worm filters what it can. No central command organizes them. The reef's organization emerges from needs meeting conditions again and again over time. On the Komodo volcanic reef slopes, this quiet self-arrangement makes the landscape feel both wild and composed. You can let your thoughts self-arrange the same way. No need to force them into order. Let one settle near the rock, one drift away, one dissolve into darkness, one open like a small polyp and close again. The story remains around you, steady enough that even wandering becomes part of the descent. We continue lower, and the lower slope receives us. The sediment ahead has a slightly different texture, finer and smoother perhaps, where the current slows behind a rise. A sea pen stands there, solitary and pale. Its polyps face the water, feeding from particles we can barely see. Below the surface, a stalk anchors it in soft ground. Above, it lifts into the current, like a quiet quill writing nothing the eye can easily read. Sea pens can sometimes produce light when disturbed, a soft glow moving along the colony. We do not disturb this one. We only imagine that somewhere inside its tissues the possibility of light is stored, waiting for a reason. That possibility is enough. In deep water, many wonders are better left as possibilities because the unspent glow keeps the darkness gentle. Around the sea pen, the Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes feel almost dreamlike. Hard Reef is behind us, but not forgotten. The volcanic island is above us, but unseen. The animals here are fewer, each surrounded by a larger margin of dark water or sand. The scene breathes more slowly. Even the current seems to pause before continuing, as though it too is listening for sleep. A small fish rests on the bottom, propped on its fins. Its eyes catch a faint reflection. It may be waiting for tiny prey to pass, or simply holding position in a calm pocket. The body is still, but the gills move. That is often enough in the deepening reef to see only breathing. Breathing means presence. Presence means the landscape is not empty. You can feel your own breathing answering that small motion. Slow in, slow out. The water around the fish passes over its gills. The air in your room passes through your body. Different worlds, same quiet exchange. The Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes become a bridge between them, not because you are really underwater, but because the mind can make rest from rhythm, and rhythm is everywhere here. The slope continues, and we follow without needing a destination. More sand, more scattered stone, more small openings, a low sponge mound, a faint track, a dark shell. The animals are not arranged for display. They are arranged by what works: food, shelter, current, attachment, softness, and shadow. The result is beautiful because it is true to the place. Truth here is not sharp. It is rounded by water. The reef is volcanic, but softened. The current is strong elsewhere, but here it is gentle. The animals are specialized, but their lives feel simple when watched from a distance. The Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes hold these balances in a way that can steady the listener, giving the mind something real and calm to lean against. We pass over another burrow, larger than the last. The entrance is edged with shell fragments and pebbles, arranged by the occupant over time. A faint movement inside suggests a crab or shrimp, but it remains hidden. The doorway itself is the visible part of the life. On the lower slope, doorways matter. They show where the soft bottom has been made habitable by effort. A burrow changes the sediment around it. It moves oxygen deeper. It alters microbial processes. It creates shelter for one animal, and sometimes for others. It can become a feeding place, a refuge, a trap for particles, a landmark. The Komodo Volcanic Reef slopes are shaped not only from above by currents and from below by geology, but also from within by the small engineering of animals. That engineering is quiet enough to sleep beside, grain by grain, shell by shell. A tunnel maintained through the night. A burrow cleared after a current covers it. A doorway reopened. The animal may never see the slope the way we describe it, but it knows its own small area with exactness. Its world is narrow, perhaps, but it is full. The water darkens slightly again, and the next patch of rock appears almost black. Encrusting life covers the upper surface, but the lower side is bare where sediment rubs against it. A few thin arms of a brittle star extend from underneath, collecting food. Each arm moves independently, curling and uncurling with delicate control. The body remains hidden, a center protected by stone and shadow. Brittle stars are abundant in many marine habitats, and on reef slopes they often occupy crevices, sponges, coral branches, and sediment pockets. Some scavenge, some suspension feed, some graze. Their flexible arms allow them to explore without exposing the central body. They are well suited to a world where food arrives unpredictably and shelter is valuable. Their quiet reach feels like thought extending from rest. You may be resting that way now, most of you withdrawn, only a thin line of attention extended into the story. It touches a brittle star, a sea pen, a black sand ripple, then curls back. It does not need to hold anything firmly. The descent will continue without being watched perfectly. The Komodo volcanic reef slopes have enough patience for imperfect listening. A soft band of current lifts us slightly above the bottom. From here, the lower slope appears as a wide, dim plain tilted into darkness. The scattered reef patches look like low islands. The sand between them holds tracks and burrows. Particles drift in slow layers. There is no single center to the scene, and that absence of center feels restful. The whole place is the center. This is the point where the question of what lives here becomes almost too broad to answer in names. Fish, corals, sponges, worms, crustaceans, mollusks, echinoderms, tunicates, hydroids, algae, bacteria, plankton, and countless small forms beyond easy notice all live along the Komodo volcanic reef slopes. But the deeper answer is that life lives here by fitting itself to depth, current, stone, sand, and fading light. We stay with the fitting rather than the list. A sponge fits the flow. A goby fits the burrow. A sea fan fits the current. A coral fits the ledge. A worm fits the sediment. A cuttlefish fits the pattern of the bottom. Each fit is temporary and ongoing, adjusted through movement, growth, behavior, and generations. The reef is a place of living adjustments, all happening in water. The current turns again, and a faint scent of imagined mineral cold returns to the mind. Real underwater scent is not like air, of course, but the body can still imagine wet stones, salt, algae, and the metallic cleanness of deep water. These sensory impressions make the landscape intimate. They bring the Komodo volcanic reef slopes close enough to feel, even though they remain in the dark sea between islands. We descend beside one more low ridge, its crest covered with sparse life. A few branching hydroids, a small sponge, a brownish soft coral, a brittle star coiled beneath, a fish resting close to the rock. The ridge may be part of old volcanic structure or a hardened accumulation shaped by biology and sediment. Whatever its origin, it offers height above the sand, and height is valuable in a moving sea. From a higher point, a filter feeder can meet more current. A fish can see more water. A lava may settle where sediment does not bury it immediately. The ridge changes the local world by only a little, but that little is enough. On the Komodo volcanic reef slopes, small differences in elevation, flow, and texture can decide which lives gather where and how they endure. You can feel the small differences in your own rest. A pillow adjusted slightly, a blanket pulled closer. A breath slowed by one count. These are not dramatic changes, but they alter the whole inner landscape. The reef's lesson remains quiet and practical. Comfort is often made from small adjustments, repeated until the body feels held. The ridge passes behind us, the sand opens again, the lower slope continues into a darker reach where details appear slowly and leave slowly. A faint trail, a small mound, a pale opening, a low sponge. The story does not close around them. It lets them remain suspended as they are in the water, each one part of the same calm descent along the Komodo volcanic reef slopes.